I love that as soon as we hit record, people start talking in the background.
It's true.
So for those who are listening, welcome to Bookworm. And Joe had VBS at church this week. And since I record at church now, there's potentially background noise. My apologies if Mike isn't able to get it out of the editing, but there's that. Life goes on. Sometimes you have to deal with things, right? So my apologies.
I'll work my magic.
Anyway, this has nothing to do with Bookworm. We have a few things to follow up on here, one of which I didn't put in the outline and I did not warn you about, so my apologies on this, but I was looking through some of what the Sweet Setup has been up to lately and been trying to keep up with some of this Obsidian course stuff. Is it a course? I didn't look into it too close. What is it, Mike?
It's a course.
Okay.
But the thing that you're probably referring to at the moment is the workshop.
Okay. All right.
So 0 to Obsidian is the workshop that I did, which, breaking news here for Bookworm listeners, we're going to be doing it again because I shared, I think, last time how it was very successful, a lot of positive feedback on it. So we're going to run it back.
Nice. Well, I saw that and I know about course stuff and I was hoping, because I'm trying to process this stuff. How does this compare to what Nick is doing over at Linking Your Thinking? What's the difference between the two? Why would I pick one over the other?
Sure.
Just for my own curiosity.
Well, the correct answer is C, all of the above.
Fair enough.
So I learned a lot from Nick's Linking Your Thinking course, and I 100% recommend that works. It's a cohort-based class. So it's like 6 weeks of live sessions and then some self-paced stuff, and you have to do the work along with everybody else. It's a different approach. That's kind of you can use whatever tool you want. And here's the key concepts for working with your ideas. He talks about the idea emergence stuff, like how to set it up so you can find your things from top to bottom or bottom to top or even side to side. And he talks a lot about PKM in general, the different aspects of it. Basically, if you follow his YouTube channel at all, it's like that, but better. And the Obsidian course that we're working on is going to cover some basic elements of PKM, but it's not going to be here's everything you need to know, now piece it together yourself, like Nick does.
Sure.
You really have to put in the work if you're going to get the most value out of Nick's course. That's just the way that it's designed. It's higher level. Whereas the 0 to Obsidian workshop, the whole goal there was people they've heard of PKM, but primarily they're just Apple nerds, and they like playing with the shiny new apps. So how do I get started with PKM in 2 hours? And so we're going to walk you through the very basic elements of it, help you identify one problem you're going to solve, build a solution to that, and then you can use that going forward and you can bolt things onto that as you see fit. A lot of specific stuff on here's how you do this kind of thing in Obsidian. There'll be videos in there how I do my book notes. Rose is making one, I think, on how you would run a Dungeons and Dragons game.
Oh, sure.
Using one of the dice roller plugins and things like that. So lots of different workflow examples for if you want to do this sort of thing, here's how you do it. But Linking Your Thinking, the cool thing about that is everybody walks out of that with their own version of their system, and it's always very different. You showcase your capstone project, they call it, as you go, and so you get ideas from how other people are doing things, and you kind of cobble together something that's uniquely your own, whereas people who come to the Sweet Setup typically are I want to know how to do this thing.
Yeah.
How can you help me take action as quickly as possible? So different approach, really.
Okay, that helps. Thanks for that. Other follow-up, I have one that I had on my list from last time. That was very simply lead my people. And that has actually gone pretty well. And I think some of what we're going to talk about today is going to play into that very heavily. But the process that I've been going through is just making sure that whenever I am talking to people and I'm working with the folks who do a lot of stuff with me and for me, I'm making sure that that process is one that's very easy for them and that I'm involved in their day-to-day because of my role and such, and just making sure that I'm not making things difficult for them. And so far, that seems to be going well. I've had a couple folks thank me already for being willing to step in and do some stuff with them. So I don't know. It seems like it's going well, but it's forever a task to be done, not one that's going to be done in 2 weeks. If it were, everybody would be a leader, I'm sure. But alas, here we are. That's what I got. What do you have, Mike?
I've got two. One that I did complete is Think Bigger. And as I am sitting here recording this to you, I just got back from the Blanc Media team retreat, which is why I ended up flying this week for the first time in about 18 months, which was an experience. Join the live if you want to hear all the details. But that was all about, like, where do we want to be in 10 years, 3 years, big picture, vision type stuff. So there was lots of thinking bigger on this retreat. So that one I will consider complete. The keyword procrastination log, nope, didn't do it. But that will be remedied with our next book, hopefully.
Okay, fair enough. I knew when I was putting the show notes together, I knew that this was something that you had said you'd procrastinated on. It's like, okay, so I guess it has to go back on there, so it now needs to go again. Is that what you're telling me? So
yes. So the next book is my pick, and it's going to be Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. And I don't know a lot about this, but procrastinate, so it kind of is built into the system that he is going to be trying to convince us to use. And I've been thinking about that, and I'm assuming a lot of this is like, I just don't want to do this right now. So I'm going to kick it out till a future point, and that's probably going to require some sort of do/defer date. We recently interviewed Ken Case for the Focus podcast, and so I am playing around with OmniFocus again.
Mike.
Well, there's reasons for this, okay?
You talked to Ken, that's why.
Well, first of all, if you sign up for Deep Focus, we talked about Ken's custom perspectives, and it was really interesting because I always felt bad about how uncomplicated my OmniFocus setup was, and he basically validated me because his isn't very complicated either. He does some cool things with it, but basically it doesn't need to be super complex. So go listen to that episode if you want more details about how Ken uses it and how he runs the Omni group and transfers things from OmniFocus to their Omni Bug Zapper program. But then also, Shortcuts is on the Mac. And I have seen the shortcuts people have for like creating OmniFocus projects and things, and I always thought to myself, well, that looks cool, but it's only on my iPhone or my iPad, and that's not where I want to manage my tasks. However, that coming to the Mac, I definitely need to play with this.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm on the beta for version 4, and I am gonna be giving this another go.
Nice. Yeah, I saw some of the stuff around beta 4. I was like, I feel like I should get involved with that, but when all you do is like templated projects, pretty much all systems will let you do that to some degree. And this is going to sound like I'm jumping on a bandwagon, but the last couple of them that I've run, I just dumped them into Obsidian and just ticked the boxes off and put it alongside the notes I have for the stream or the webinar or whatever it is I'm doing. It's like, it's
easy. I know.
So like, yes, running all the dates and stuff in OmniFocus is great, but I wasn't using any of it. Like, sure, that's great, but I'm still like floating that line between the two of them. So I haven't really decided what I'm landing on with that. But if I had a full blown digital task management system, I could totally see going all in on it. But as we sit here, this trusty notebook has served me way better than any digital task management system I have tried for many, 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 many years now. So I just am going to have a hard time letting that one go at this point. So that's where I land.
Well, as you know, my fancy notebook is not a true bullet journal, so I need some place for these things.
No, it's a fake. It's a total fake.
And Obsidian probably could handle it, but that just isn't quite clicking for me. There's lots of things you can do with queries, and I've played around with some of the tasks plugins. You can do like repeating tasks with them, and you can even add start dates with Some of them it's pretty crazy, and I'm sure as new plugins come out, that eventually someone will have like the exact one that I'm looking for, and I'll be able to combine it with my Kanban, and it'll be great. But at the moment, it's just not quite there.
Right.
And so OmniFocus is great. I'm not gonna get $200 a year of value out of wrangling those tasks, but as a basic reminders sort of a thing, which I already have access to because I already paid to support it. I don't know. I'm gonna give it another shot.
Most of the stuff that I need reminders for, I just put it in the Do
See,
app.
I've been doing that too, but
I've done that for a couple years now too. So
yeah, so I've got things in Do and I've got things in Obsidian, and I'm already using two different systems at that point, and I could just continue to use the nagging reminders in Do, or I could just those nagging reminders, they're good in theory. In reality, they just annoy me.
sure.
Which is kind of the point. But usually what ends up happening is like I get one like yesterday, 5 p.m. Hey, it's time to time block your day. Well, I'm not in a place to do that. So just go away, and I snooze it and then it pops up again. Oh, well, now I'm in the car with my wife who picked me up from the airport. I'm not going to do this right now. So I snooze it again. And at that point, like I keep getting these alerts, these notifications. I'm like, this is pointless. I don't want to think about this right now. And I just keep kicking the can down the road and it keeps annoying me. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
I hear you. I think I use it for things that are different than you. I don't use it for things like time block your day. I use it for make bread or take your Adderall like that. So that's what I do with it. So for me, I have one that goes off every morning at 7 a.m. that just says take Adderall. Has a really cute pill emoji next to it because it makes me feel better. And I have that go off every morning. Well, that one's kind of important. Like it needs to nag me until it's done. Otherwise, if I wait till 8:30, 9 o'clock and I take it then, Joe's not going to sleep well that night. So
Sure.
we got to get it done. So I use it for those reminders where this is actually time bound. It's not a nice to have. It's not a self-inflicted deadline. It's this has to happen at this point. That's all I use it for. And anything that's a nice to have, would like to do it today, that's in the bullet journal.
I feel like that is 99% of my tasks.
It's like the nice to haves. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
If I don't get to something, I'm realizing that the world does not end. The type of stuff that I would keep in my task manager.
Sure.
So I don't know. I have no idea how this is going to look like again. I reinvented everything last spring and it worked for a while. And I feel like now that things are kind of getting back to a little bit more normal, it's just not quite working for me. I need stuff that's going to notify me when it's the right place to do it. Like a lot of the stuff that I do at church, kind of getting into today's book, I need to follow up with people and get answers to things, and I don't want to think about it when I am laying in bed at night. Oh, I forgot to ask. I need to do it when I'm there.
Yes.
So using something like a context-based reminder is perfect. Dude's not going to give me that.
I feel like it would, but that's because I've learned that for me, contexts are more time sensitive than they are location sensitive. Even with so much of the stuff that I do being in a building and requiring me to be in a physical place. Well, if I have similar schedules, I know the time that things need to happen, and I generally know when I'm going to meet with people. So
sure,
that's how it works for me, but I feel like I'm an oddball in that. And maybe I'm just too simplistic. Like the whole context-based thing, I tried it for years, tried all sorts of different things with it, and it just never stuck. I always found myself trying to find, like, if I could get my context right for whatever reason, that would mean that my tasks would get themselves done and I wouldn't have to work too hard at it.
Yep.
That's also why I found myself switching task management tools. It's like, okay, well, if I go to text files, I'll get stuff done. Like the tasks will get done because I wasn't getting them done in OmniFocus. Well, okay, it wasn't getting done in either of those. Let's try bullet journaling. Well, guess what? Sometimes they still don't get done. And I've just finally learned it's not the tool. It's this dumb monkey brain that can't get it done and won't sit down to start things. Like that's the actual problem, not the tool. So I need to stop trying to make context or tools do the work. Like, well, it's not going to work that way unless I go to work. So
Yep.
here we are.
We've
Joe
diagnosed the
fails.
problem, and it's somewhere between the chair and the computer.
It's but between these two sets of like this headphone and this headphone is where like somewhere between those two is the problem. So yes. Well, that all said, let's jump into today's book because I feel like there are a lot of places we could go with this. We've kind of alluded to it a couple times unknowingly here as well. But if we jump into today's, this is Digital Body Language by Erica Dhawan, I think is how you say it. And I'm pretty stoked about this. This is really, I think, outside what we would normally do, but yet fits, I think, a lot of what Bookworm, like what we talk about here, primarily because this is about communication. And we've talked about communication a number of times. Have we done a book on communication before? I was trying to place this. I didn't look at the book list. I probably should have. But
yes, with an asterisk. We did the Patrick King book.
That's true. That's true. We did do that. I'm sorry. I inflicted pain on you with that one, I think. And I had a lot of fun in it in the process as well. So my apologies. But this
sorry,
is
not sorry. That's what I'm hearing.
It's totally sorry, not sorry. It's like, I'm sorry because it wasn't fun for you, but it was very fun for me. So I'm not actually sorry. So
I know someone who, whenever someone would complain about something like that, instead of saying they were sorry, they'd be like, "Aw, that's unfortunate."
I should do that. That would be really frustrating for people. This is one that I feel like is very applicable given the last year and a half of what has been not inflicted on, but what the international world has gone through with COVID and everybody being stuck at home and being forced to communicate digitally solely. As a result of that, I feel like being able to communicate well in a digital context is a skill that not many people have even considered, let alone the detail with which you should consider it as proposed by Erica here in Digital Body Language. And having gone through this, like, I really appreciated her being willing to tackle this topic. That was my original interest in this. Is I just don't think I've seen anyone try to tackle this topic of how do you text someone? When do you text someone versus an email? When should you call? Like, how do you write the subject line on an email such that it's not going to scare your employees to death into thinking that they're going to get fired? Like, unknowingly, right? Those are the things that just, I feel like I haven't seen anything about that. Maybe you have. I just don't think I've seen a book or a course or anybody really talk about this, at least not at this level, if that makes sense. So I don't know. What were your initial thoughts, Mike?
Had this been out in March of 2020, it should have been required reading for every C-level employee in the world.
Absolutely. 100%. Yes.
I remember talking to some people who are part of the stuff that we were doing with the focus course, and they were really frustrated because they were having to do everything virtually, primarily via Zoom. And they were saying, like, their managers all want to have these meetings all the time. And what ends up happening is they're spending 8 hours a day in meetings, and the managers feel like, great, this totally allows us to get all of our work done. Only problem is for the employees, they didn't have any time to get their actual work done. And they were still expected to do the same amount of work. So they were at home trying to balance school and everything else with all their families. Everybody's working from the same place, trying to figure out internet situations and what devices are people going to use. And they're in meetings all day and no time to do the actual work. So I feel like there's a lot of lessons that we've learned the hard way in the last 18 months-ish. And there's a lot of great tips I don't want to say tips and tricks necessarily, because really this is just like best practices for communicating digitally. And it's not just Zoom calls, it's text messages, it's Slack, email, a lot of different things in here that just about any organization could benefit from understanding some of this stuff a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put this, because like you're saying, it's not necessarily just how to do a video call. It's like, well, when should you do a video call? And what is the difference between choosing to do a video call and sending an email?
And you know what? That's not as simple as like these are the parameters around that either, because she gets to
No.
that in part 3, like generational differences and cultural differences, and you really got to be able to read the room and know who you're dealing with before you can select the proper medium.
Yes. Yeah. Which is fascinating too. So the part 3 is one that's very interesting. There's 3 different areas, like differences in body language across these 3 different areas, which we'll get to. But before we do that, I want to start with chapter 1, which is in part 1, which is digital elements of style. And there's one chapter here that is what is digital body language. And I don't know that there's a specific point at which I want to read anything from this that dictates like what she means by digital body language, but there are some different examples of what traditional body language would involve as compared to digital body language. Let me just read one of these just so that you can kind of see what the difference is between these two. So in traditional body language, let's take the example of smiling. Okay, so traditional body language is kind of like smiling. It's contagious. As she says, our smile lights up the areas of the brain linked to happiness, which is why the people we smile at tend to smile back and or feel a stronger sense of connection with us. Okay, now translate that to digital body language, because yes, I can smile at Mike right now, but it's not the same as if we were in the same room together, and there's always going to be a really small amount of lag between the time that he sees me smile and the time he can respond to that. But if we translate this to digital body language, as she says, this involves using exclamation points and emojis, well, within reason, as she says, adding a simple "have a great weekend" to the end of an email, laughing during a video meeting. These are the translations of smiling, but how many times do you actually think that through and act on it? Like whenever you're trying to convey something or convey acknowledgement of something that someone else is doing, we don't really think about how to convey that in a digital communication system. We tend to just like, oh, okay, got it, thanks. But we don't actually write that in an email back. It's just, okay, I got the information, great, archive it, move on, don't reply, no need for it. But the other person's like, did you ever get that? They have no idea that you got it and even acknowledge that it existed. So a lot of those implicit feelings that we have to become explicit. What she says here is what is implicit in body language now has to be explicit in our digital body language, which is what I'm just saying. You have to get it out of yourself in some form.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. She compares the regular body language versus the digital body language, and you kind of made the point that they are not the same. And I have experienced that over the last however many months. I mentioned, I just went and traveled for the first time since everything got locked down. So I was in Kansas City for the Blanc Media Team Retreat, and they all work together in Kansas City. I flew in, and I have been basically working virtually for the last however many months. And I've always thought it's fine. And I realized once I got there, you 100% cannot replace face-to-face. There's so much more that happens when you're in the same place. So essentially what we're trying to do with the digital body language is make the best of a less than ideal situation, in my opinion. And I do like how she gives some examples here in this first section. So there's a list that I jotted down, examples of digital body language: liking a text, making detailed comments, using exclamation points and emoji like you had talked about, responding promptly. And then she kind of introduces the 4 laws, which we're going to get into in the next section. But really, this first chapter does a lot of like articulating why this is important and highlighting how much time we spend communicating digitally. She said about 70% of team communication is virtual. And I don't know if that stat came from the beginning of the book, which was before COVID, or the end of the book, which is after, because she mentioned she finished writing it while everything was shut down. She mentions that there are 306 billion emails sent every day. The
That
average,
kind of blew my mind when I saw that number. It's like,
yeah.
geez, that's a lot. Like, I think I get a lot of email, but
Yeah,
wow.
and then get this, the average person sends 30 and receives 96, so that's a lot. And she said 50% of the time our tone is misinterpreted. So we send a ton of email and we're really bad at it. This doesn't sound like
Yep.
a great start to effective work, effective
No.
collaboration.
No. There's a lot you could go into here. I've got a few points here for this first part for us to cover, and we can jump around here too. But one of them I wanted to point out is that she does mention emoji, which I know you and I, whenever we text, tend to use them fairly liberally, and I found that I tend to do that with a lot of people. When I
Mm-hmm.
read this, I realized why. It's because it just conveys so much more than what I can actually type out. Now, if I were to just send some emoji and not actually have any text with it, I don't think it would get my point across. But it's very easy for me to write something back. It's like, sure, sounds great, and then just have no punctuation with it. Well, then that's going to get misinterpreted like every single time, just because I'm not telling you, am I excited about it? Or am I just like, sure, sounds great? Like, you can misinterpret that tone so many ways that if
Yeah.
I were to throw some of those on there, you can see, like, am I frustrated with you? Am I actually excited? Am I just neutral? Like, you can start to, I guess, tweak your words a little bit to where it's a little easier to get the full meaning across.
Yeah. So Blake says that's a lot of people who need to read a world without email. 100% agree.
Yes.
And then Carol mentions that she always uses periods in her digital communications, and she never thought she was conveying anything more than a complete sentence. Uh, Erica talks about that in the back of this book too, in part 3, how the generational differences between text, how a lot of people will, older people specifically, will think they're communicating in incomplete sentences, and a lot of younger people will think, oh, they're really mad at me.
That really
So
caught me off guard because I write in full sentences.
I think I'm probably somewhere in the middle.
Sure. When I go read my tweets, go to Twitter and read through all of my tweets. Generally speaking, I write them in full, complete, grammatically correct sentences. I don't like to shorten things. I've tried. There are a few recently that I've been trying to break this habit because, like, okay, I don't do this. Like, this is me writing technically,
Mm-hmm.
and in my mind, it's like I am conveying that I like to write in a way that is very accurate, not open for interpretation. And I'm realizing that that may be conveying something that I'm not intending to convey. So I think I'm with Carol. This doesn't necessarily have to be generational, I don't think. So
It can be cultural too. Talking about needing to learn how to use emojis, they Erica talks in this section about some of the ways that emojis are interpreted differently. For example, the thumbs up emoji in the US means got it or you like something, but thumbs up in some Middle Eastern cultures basically means, in her words, sit on it, and is very offensive.
sure. Yeah.
So, really, what this book highlighted for me is that I have my own norms that I have established over my experience of communicating, both in person and digitally. And I tend to project those onto the people that I am communicating with. But I can't do that. I need to understand how to speak somebody else's language if I'm going to communicate effectively. And ultimately, getting back to the last book, Leaders Eat Last, if I'm going to be a good leader. And so this book has a lot of like tips and tricks. Again, I hate that term, but a lot of like tactics, little things that you can do that will help with this sort of thing. But the realization I got is whether you are communicating with somebody who's older or younger than you, or communicating with somebody in a different part of the world than you, or just communicating with somebody who uses a different style than you need to learn how to speak their language. And that's not easy. It's almost like learning a foreign language. But it's worthwhile, especially when everything is happening, quote unquote, virtually. The other thing with this is that she mentions in the first chapter that technology helps people create masks. And I can totally see this, how people will create this persona and they'll say things a certain way that they wouldn't in real life. Not just the people who are going to say really offensive things because they can hide behind their screen, but just you can pretend to be somebody that you're not a lot easier online than you can in real life. And so I think all of this stuff that she shares in this book helps you communicate effectively so you can get past the mask and understand who you're really communicating with, and also dismantle some of your own masks maybe. But you have to get past those masks if you are going to communicate effectively.
There's something that happened in the chat that I don't think was intentional, or at least partially intentional, that just exemplifies what we're talking about. So this is from Blake. It is funny how a period has become an indication of anger, and he ends that in a period. Follow that with Carol's comment, true Blake, with a period. I now intentionally go back and delete them with no period there. So it's like, okay, I see this. Like I could see, Carol, what you mean, but not having the period there does make it look quite a bit different. And I could see how having the period there maybe, I don't think I would jump to anger, but again, this is me coming from that's grammatically correct stance. So I don't know, maybe that's a thing. Maybe I should get rid of the period button on my keyboard.
And to make this more complicated, in chapter 2, it talks about the trust and power matrix, where you have the 4 quadrants, as you do with productivity graphs.
They always do.
And on the y-axis, you have the amount of power. So higher up you go, the more power you have. And then the bottom 2, you have less power than the person you are communicating to. And then how much you trust each other, whether you're far apart or whether you're pretty close. And that even indicates how you would communicate to someone. This is really tricky. You know, if I'm working with Joe as one of the people who's underneath you on your tech team, I have to communicate with you differently when we are at work than I do in this podcast when we're friends.
Yes.
So it's not as simple as like apply this style to Joe.
Yeah, it's very different. And I've seen this a couple times with folks that work under me at church that I go help with things like moving from house to house. Because what happens is when they're here, they tend to morph into my communication needs. But whenever I'm helping them, it's backwards. I have to change and communicate with them in their method. And it's like this whole weird, like, okay, everything has to be different. Just because it went from you listening to me and now me listening to you, the person in power alters. So the whole communication method and style just completely flips. And that is weird.
Yeah. In a recent episode of Focused, which has yet to be released as we record this one, David and I talked about communication. And I asked him, do you think that podcasting kind of trains you to communicate less effectively? Because a lot of communication is simply you waiting to respond to something someone said instead of actually listening. When you are actually listening, you're not formulating what you're going to say while the other person is talking. You know, those are essentially wait to talkers, not actually listeners. What do you think? Do you think that this kind of nudges us in the wrong direction?
That's very possible, because what happens is, okay, stop and think about the medium of podcasting. And for those of you listening to this, I want you to think about the amount of time that you will tolerate between the moment that one person stops speaking and the moment when the next person starts speaking. And just as an example, if you pay attention to when Mike and I are back and forth, there's very little time between the moment when Mike stops and I start, or vice versa.
There's
But if I were
even
to
less
pause,
after I edit it.
yeah, that's true. So he's going to cut it down even more later. But if I were to stop and let that hang, that was only 2 seconds, right? Maybe not even.
Yeah, and
if you were to
Overcast
look
is
at
going to automatically remove that for you.
It will. But that feels awkward whenever you're listening to a podcast. So what happens is podcasters who get good at this, we generally, I'm thinking about what I need to say the moment that Mike stops speaking, like instantly, because I don't want there to be that dead space. And I know you're the same way, Mike. And whenever you listen to podcasters, especially if you were to catch Mike and I say at Max Stock and you were to see us talk, have you ever noticed this? We do this whenever we're in person too. Like we tend to just talk that way. And it's just because this is the way that we generally speak with each other. Even if we're on the phone, it's just the way we work. It probably makes us bad listeners. I'm sure it does, just because we're always trying to figure out what comes next. I've noticed myself doing this with people that we're not on a podcast. I'm just in conversation with them. So I have noticed myself doing that now. I don't know if that's my introverted, I don't like dead space thing coming in, or if that's just the podcasting thing. I'm sure there's a lot going on there, but I'm with you. That's a long, pre and post amble to what you're saying. But yes, I agree.
I think part of it is it's a reinforcement of a negative tendency, but that doesn't mean that it has to impact your communication. And I even think, like, depending on the podcast, you will get different versions of this. I think a lot of interview podcasts, the interviewer will walk into the interview having done all of the research and having all of their questions prepped ahead of time, and they won't even listen to what the other person is saying. They'll just ask their questions and collect the answers. One of the best pieces of advice that I got on that, by the way, was to ask like 2 questions and then make a summary statement of what you have heard, adding your own slant to it, because you're kind of reinforcing then that you are listening to the responses and you are contributing to the conversation. But as the interviewer, it's not really about you, it's about the other person. If I'm interviewing James Clear, no one wants to hear what I have to say.
No, not at all. They're not there for you.
So I'm guiding the conversation via the questions that I'm asking, and I tend to not be the type of person who walks in with a bunch of canned questions. I will have a couple usually because I want to be able to start somewhere, but then I like to go off the script, and sometimes that makes the people I'm interviewing a little bit nervous. I always try to like give them an out, couch it as like, so this maybe is a little outside your comfort zone, or maybe this is, you're not comfortable answering this, but and then I'll ask the question, giving them an opportunity to like take it in a different direction if they want to. But I also think that if you were to listen to a lot of news podcasts specifically, where you're just rambling in response to current events, there's a lot more tendency to do this sort of thing. I'm remembering something I saw, I think it was an Instagram video of like 3 minutes. The whole clip was 3 minutes worth of video of this person just using like standard podcaster space filler phrases.
Yeah.
And not actually saying anything.
Sure.
I feel like we don't do that a whole lot. And every once in a while, I'll hear it in the edit and I'll try to tighten it up a little bit. But for the most part, we have a specific direction that we're going with the conversation because we have these books as the guideposts.
Yeah. I mean, we can normally, when we've got our outline, we know what comes next, which at the moment is timing for your response, because we need to keep going. But I don't know how emoji got on us on all of that. But this is one that is really important, and this may come up a little bit later, but I'm very curious about your thoughts on this, Mike, because I know that you're not an email person, and she talks about timing when you should send responses to things here. And although she does give us some outs later on as far as like just making other people aware of what to expect as far as a response from you, and knowing that that's something that you can couch ahead of time can be super helpful. But One of the things that she mentions in this section around timing is that it's generally considered acceptable etiquette to wait up to 24 hours before responding to an email, meaning you've got 1 day to get a response back before people start to wonder, did they get it? Are they going to respond? Are they upset with me? Did I say that wrong? Maybe I put it in a wrong way and they don't really understand what's going on. So maybe I should follow up with them, but that seems like I'd be doing it too soon. Like they're just completely thrown off. You get that point. What was your response to this? Because I know that you don't normally respond within 24 hours on an email. It's normally once a week? Is that your time frame? Somewhere in there?
Usually.
I don't know. I don't email you. I text you because email is not a thing I want to give you.
So this is where the syntopical reading of all of the books comes in, because I read that and I immediately thought, this is making assumptions about the rules of engagement around email that Cal Newport has encouraged us to rebel against. And I'm going to side with Cal on this one.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I do think that if you are in an organization where that is the norm, you maybe need to have a conversation before you would just stop responding to emails. But I don't have that. I guess I'm fortunate in that regard. So everybody who assumes those rules apply, that doesn't mean I have to play by those rules, and I won't. Just look at all of the requests that we get via email to review fiction books for Bookworm. I don't reply to any of those. I don't feel like I owe any of those people a reply.
They don't deserve it.
And I'm sorry if you're one of those people who listens to the podcast, but my job is to make stuff, not reply to requests. And so I will go in there whenever I feel like I have some bandwidth to deal with that stuff. And usually I'm apologetic if there is something important in there, be like, hey, sorry, I'm just now getting around to this, and pick it up from there. So
it bugs me when I get those requests like, will you review my book? It's like, did you even read the description of what Bookworm is? Like, it just points out in the description.
You can't take 5 minutes to figure out what we are, and you're asking me to invest 10 hours
or more.
No, that's not a fair trade. It's not going to happen.
No, you can fire off that email in less than 30 seconds. Have you ever noticed that some of them get caught? You probably don't see this, but on the admin side, there are some of them that get caught because it triggers that they set up a new account, they immediately sent a private message to us, and they typed the message way too fast to be able to actually type it, which means that they pasted it in. So it's a form letter type thing. So they just found places that they could potentially get the book in front of and just said, here you go. Will you do this? Will you take all this time and make my life easy? Like, no, because you didn't. So anyway, that's us getting on our high horse.
And that is the problem with email, is these addresses are available. You can find them fairly easily, and you don't have any sort of trust established with this person. And then you've opened up a door to a bunch of requests, which if all you did was make every single person who requested something of you via email happy, you would do nothing else the rest of your life. So kind of going back to that trust power matrix, I'm assuming that if you're reaching out to me via email, we don't have any sort of trust in our relationship. If we do, you're going to ascend the ladder. It's probably going to be Twitter first, and then, because I'm going to have to follow you in order for you to DM me, and then from there, text messages. And those I will get back to, but email, not so much.
Yeah, I leave my DMs open, which is good or bad. I don't know. I get some responses from folks. Let's talk about your digital persona, and then we'll go on to part 2.
Do we have to?
We do, because this is important, because I search for people all the time, and I feel like this is important. And do you do this? Do you search for people online? Just do a quick search for somebody's name?
So,
do you ever do this?
No, but I know that I have a problem with this. So I am Mike Schmitz. Mike Schmitz is always taken.
Yep.
So my digital persona is Bobblehead Joe.
Yep.
Which makes no sense.
Yep.
It was an inside joke from The Office that I signed up for a long time ago. And I can not get any sort of version of Mike Schmidt's that I would be happy to embrace to replace it. I checked yesterday to see if there was anything else available. There is not. So that is problem number 1. Mike Schmidt's is always taken.
Okay.
Problem number 2, there is a younger Catholic priest who is very involved on YouTube, Father Mike Schmidt's, not me. I get people saying all the time, "Hey, are you Father Mike Schmidt's?" No, I am not. I am a different Mike Schmidt's who happens to have a Bible college degree, who is not a father. It's hard to explain. So I know I have tons of area to improve.
You have some
for
baggage
myself.
on your digital persona. Okay,
Yes.
well, the 4 aspects that go into a digital persona, and she recommends that you keep these top notch: your name, your email address, your avatar or profile picture, and then pay attention to what shows up on your search results, namely what shows up on your LinkedIn profile, et cetera, et cetera. And I am one of these people, unlike Mike, who can pretty much get my name whenever and wherever I want. So if you want to find my account on pretty much any major social media network, Joe Bulig will get you directly to me. So it's pretty straightforward. At the same time, like I don't spend much time trying to figure out what search results show for my name, but I search other people's names constantly. And I don't know if that's just because we have a lot of people that come into the church that were just a little bit like, what is going on with you? Who are you? Should I trust you in the kids department? Probably not until we can figure out what your past is. So we end up searching for a lot of folks, just trying to figure out, are they trustworthy or not? Who are they? Where are they from? Do they have kids? And you can learn an awful lot about people just from that. So keep this up to date. Pay attention to it, I guess, is what I'm saying. But I brought it up because I knew, Mike, that you have this Bobblehead Joe thing going on. But I have no idea what you could do about it.
Give me a better option. I will change it on air.
I know you would. But I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. I know that people figure this out. There are folks that have like runoffs on their name. They use acronyms instead of their name, and it works well. Like Marquez Brownlee, the MKBHD acronym seems to work well for him. So stuff like that I could see. But
I tried FBP Mike, faith-based productivity. Not available.
I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
I'll put it out to the chat. If you got something, let me know.
Okay, this is the call for all Bookworm listeners. Mike needs a new online handle.
Yes. We'll start with Twitter.
What is it? Bobblehead Mike is a recommendation here.
Yeah, no, not going to happen.
Because I think the issue is actually the bobblehead part of this. Oh, wait, okay. we'll leave that for the Bookworm listeners. They're going to solve your problem for you.
Cool.
Tweet at, how do we do this? Tweet at Bookworm. Send us a tweet at Bookworm FM or to Mike, who is currently Bobblehead Joe on Twitter. Let him know what his new username should be. I'm totally on board with this project. I like this. We need to follow up with this one next time. Okay, part 2, the 4 laws of digital body language. Although these are probably the meat of the book, I feel like they're fairly straightforward. So I don't know how much time we'll spend on this. The first one of these 4 laws is to value visibly. Process that for a second. Mm-hmm. Value visibly. Think about what I was talking about earlier. Whenever you smile, like you can't convey a smile over a text message easily. You have to actually be explicit with what you're trying to get across. And this is something I know like a lot of digital only companies get very into, is whenever they want to praise someone or say something positive to someone, they do it publicly. Like you've heard this before, praise in public. This is similar to that. Value visibly. Show someone the value to them in some form of a written method or a video or an audio file or something. Make it very well known to them that you're valuing the work that they're doing. Otherwise, if you appreciate the work they're doing, but you never put it into documentation of any kind, and there is no face-to-face happening, guess what? They have no idea if they did a good job or bad, and likely will interpret it as they did a bad job simply because they got no feedback on it. I did this all the time in corporate. I assumed everything I did was complete trash because no one ever said anything good or bad about it. So, and I found out much later that they really appreciated it. It got promoted for stuff that I thought was trash and didn't really know what to do with it. So there's that. Tell people that they're doing a good job if you think they're doing a good job. Make it very visible.
Yes, agreed. One of the things that we do with the Blanc Media team, which is pretty cool, it's kind of a built-in system for this kind of thing. I mean, ideally, you're giving positive feedback and you're saying good job every time someone is presenting their work project, right? But if that doesn't happen, an easy way to implement something like this is the expressing gratitude at the end. You know, we express gratitude to a single person for something that they did that really, you know, we wanted to call out and say thank you for. And I do the same thing with my discipleship group at church. There's something about expressing gratitude that makes the rest of your communication with that individual better. So not just the work aspect of they feel good because they did the right thing and you're giving them live feedback on what they're doing, but a lot of the work that we have to do together, which even for people like us who do a lot of our creating individually, we have to remember that. The average person, I think they said, has to work with 10 people or more daily, which is a large number. And now just imagine that those relationships are not good. And every time you need something from someone, their initial reaction is to draw back because they don't like you. Well, that makes everything really, really hard, doesn't it? So it's worthwhile investing in the people before you try to do the work.
Yeah, I was trying to count when you said the 10. It's like, how many people do I work with on a daily basis? It's like, I think it's somewhere between 8 and 11, 8 and 12, somewhere in there. So it's probably close to 10. I didn't realize that. But is yours close to 10?
No, I mean, there's the people who are full-time with Blanc Media, and then there's a bunch of the contributors that we work with the suite setup. So if I counted all of those people, then yeah, probably. But not really working directly with everyone every single day.
Sure.
However, I do need to do a better job of not just going into monk mode and making my stuff and showing up at the end.
Why is that, Mike? I don't want to talk to anybody until this is all done and ready to be released. And then you can tell me that it's really good, right? Like, don't give me feedback before then.
Yeah. Well, it's not even feedback. Feedback assumes that like the goal of the interaction is to collaborate on the work itself. For me, I need to do a better job of prioritizing the people before the work. Going back to Chris Bailey and the productivity project, you know, people are the reason for productivity. Working with people, maintaining relationships, not efficient, but one of the most important things that you can do with your life.
Very true. Very true. I'm with you on that. So value visibly is the first of these 4 laws of digital body language. The second is communicate carefully. I feel like this is one of those places where most people fall down. Like, value visibly, yes, I get that. People could learn from that. It could be super helpful, blah, 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 blah. 2, communicate carefully. This is where the period thing really comes in, right? And should you use emoji? When do you choose what method to use? And there is a checklist here, and she calls this the think before you type checklist. And I really appreciated that she did this. There's another thing she did that I'll get to at the very end here that I thought was super helpful, but this checklist goes like this. Who needs to be included on the message? What do I want the receiver to do after they read this message? What context or information do they need? What is the appropriate tone? Which I think would be helpful, right? Should I be super serious and formal? Should I be very informal? That would be helpful. When is the best time to send this message? I worked for, I directly reported to a CEO at a previous job, and she was excellent at timing the messages that she sent to be going to the person at the best time for the other person to receive them. Always thought that was genius. What is the best channel to convey this message? So is it text, Slack, email, phone call, hop on a plane and go say hi? What is that? And then how comfortable would I be if this message is screenshotted, forwarded, or otherwise shared? What can I do to change it? Or should I save this for a phone call or face-to-face meeting? That one probably gets overlooked by most people, including myself. Like that one just doesn't really cross my mind. In my head, if I send it to my superiors, it's not going to be in front of anyone other than my superiors. So who cares how intentional I am with my wording? And when I thought about that one and just considered some of the emails I've sent, thought, I will take a little more time with some of my emails moving forward because that was not always appropriate. So I learned a lot from that one.
Sure.
Anyway, appreciate the checklist.
Yeah, she's got a lot of those checklists, and I tried to capture most of them in my MindNode file. So if you want those checklists, club.bookworm.fm/membership, $5 a month.
There you go.
The communicate clearly section here, she mentions 3 factors for choosing the right channel, which I think are important too: the length, the complexity, and the familiarity. And these are kind of guidelines, just like everything else in here. We mentioned at the beginning, you can't just make blanket rules with this stuff. But the longer the message, then you're going to want to choose something like email as opposed to text. Complexity, if it's highly complex, recommends articles, blogs, or video calls. If it's got medium complexity, an email, phone call, or conference call. And low complexity, text, instant message, or a group chat. And I have been on the receiving end of these, which are very complex and arrive via text. And then I'm like, okay, so is this what you want? So very frustrating, but also that's part of the value of this book. She mentions at the beginning, this will help you whether you are the leader of the organization or the team and you need to communicate effectively to everybody underneath you, or you happen to be the recipient of a lot of this stuff and the person above you think isn't quite doing it right. You can mode shift, you can context shift, you can take a complex text message, for example, and reply via email and choose a different, more appropriate channel. And I think that is a very important takeaway from this book, is that you don't have to be at the top in order to benefit from the knowledge that you would find here. You might have that assumption going into it. You may feel like you're in this situation, there's nothing you can do because your boss just keeps doing this stuff that's really annoying and really inefficient. But I would challenge everyone who's going to pick up this book to ask themselves, I may not be the root cause of this, but I'm going to take responsibility for fixing it. And what can I do to move things in a positive direction? And you will find something.
Always. Yeah. This is so important, I think. If you're going to become somebody who's known as communicating really well, if you find someone or you want to be someone who's able to make sure that what you're wanting to get across actually gets across, as opposed to, hey, can we meet in 10 minutes? Like even if I had this just yesterday, my boss in passing said, hey, what are you doing this afternoon? Like, I'm around if we need to do something. He's like, when you get a moment, stop by my office for 10 minutes. Like, okay. He's like, but go grab lunch first. Like, okay. Like, this is face-to-face in person. And all sorts of things went through my head. Like, did I forget to do something? Like, he doesn't normally do this. Like, did I get all the computer stuff set up for our new pastor? I had so many things go through my head. Like, what did I mess up with? And then, so I'm kind of fretting over lunch, and then I go sit down and have a chat with him in his office. Like, do I need to shut the door for this? Like, oh no, it's fine. Like, okay. He's like, okay, so the rundown for this Sunday. Like, this has nothing to do with anything I've done in the past. It has nothing to do with anything I messed up. He just wants to make sure that what I have for this Sunday, because it's a little bit of a different Sunday. He wants to make sure that we've got all the pieces and all the elements of the service ready to go, because it's a fairly tech-heavy service that's a little different than normal. That was it. And I was kind of freaking out over it. Now, if he had sent me that in a text, it'd have been way worse. Like, I would have been, what just happened? Especially if you put a period on it, right, Blake? So, like, that would have made it terrible. Communicate clearly. And I told him, I was like, I thought you were going to get upset with me. I was like, oh, no, I should have told you it was a good thing. So it's like, I'll do that next time. So I was at least able to have that conversation with him. But all that to say, communicating clearly is something that we could all learn a few more tips on. So I appreciate a lot of what she spells out here. Anything else you want to say on that before I move on?
No, I think the other thing with this, if I were to pick one more thing, would be when you assign tasks via email, use the 3 W's, who, what, and when. Just trying to communicate clearly about what is going to be done from the information that you share. Email specifically is tricky because some cultures, she talks about, they will say yes to a task, which means that they understand it, not that they are going to actually do it. So I thought that checklist was helpful. Lots of that type of stuff in here. Lots of lists.
Yeah.
Lots of like colored call out boxes, especially in these couple of sections, but nothing we really need to unpack in detail, I think, from here.
All right. So third law here then. First is value visibly, communicate carefully, and then collaborate confidently. And this one, the 3 of them really have to all work together. These first 3 all have to work together, kind of in a circle, as she has a diagram later on. But collaborate confidently is just that. If you're going to work with someone else, be confident in your ability to communicate with them digitally, and also be confident in your ability to do the task.
Yep.
And if you can do those 2 things, you're going to be much better off, the 2 of you, working together. But if you're kind of like, I don't know, what do you think? Like, if you're doing that sort of thing back and forth, it's just going to be rough. It just is. So be very confident in what you're saying and what you're doing.
Yeah, this one I liked a lot because she talks about how when you are collaborating confidently, you are stating your needs clearly, including when and why you need something. The big takeaway for me from this, leave no room for misinterpretation, fear, or anxiety. I like that. Use jargon-free language that's easily translated between different departments. And then she has a couple of things that you can do to build confidence through consistency. And I don't think I'm real great at these, but I think it's easy to project, well, there's somebody else above me who is worse at this. And I don't want to do that. Kind of my takeaway from this is like, just check these boxes as often as I can. So fight thoughtless deadlines. That's the first one. I got to be really careful when I ask someone for something to try and give them as much time as possible to get the thing done and be clear about when exactly I need it. Not just say, hey, it'd be great if you could get it done by end of day today. Eliminate chronic cancellations. This one I am pretty good at. If I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'm going to be somewhere. Nothing is going to change that. In fact, today I was kind of freaking out earlier because I had scheduled a lunch with a friend in town because we haven't connected in a while before I left for my trip. And I came back and I'm like, oh man, I really just don't have time to go do this. But I said I was going to be there, so I'm going to be there. And then he texted and canceled because his dad came into town. And he's like, hey, I'm really sorry about this. And I was like, whew. Actually, that helps out a lot. So thank you.
You would not have liked my afternoon then, because so VBS wrapped up today, right? The final program, which I ran sound for, ended at 12:15. Okay. I had to set up some stuff on the computer in there because we've got, again, this big tech-heavy thing going on this afternoon, or this Sunday, which is us doing worship in the park. So I've got a full sound gear system I got to have in a new location this Sunday, which means I got to get the key to the band shell so that I can get in on Sunday. So at 1 o'clock, I needed to leave to go get that key. But I forgot when we scheduled Bookworm that I had a hair appointment at 1:30. And I was like, well, how am I going to do this? Thankfully, she's usually pretty quick, and it's only a few minutes from the church. It's like, fine. So before 1 o'clock, I set up all the gear here and left it running. And then I went to get the key, and then I showed up about 10 minutes early to my hair appointment. And she said, oh, I'm so glad you're here, because I accidentally scheduled somebody at 1:45. I was like, that's good, because I got a thing at 2 o'clock, and I kind of got to go. So she's like, perfect. So she kind of did fairly quick. So my hair was cut right before we hopped on here. And so she finished up at 20 till 2. I drove back here and had 15 minutes or so before we started. But I totally messed up all the schedules. It worked, but I was kind of freaking out before we started. So anyway, you would not have appreciated that. All that to say,
No.
Collaborate confidently whenever you're working together. Make things very clear. And then if you can do the value visibly, communicate carefully, and collaborate confidently, on page 157, she has this diagram of those three in a circle. And then in the center of that circle is trust totally.
Mm-hmm.
And my takeaway from this particular law here, this chapter, is that whenever you're able to do those other three, when you value visibly, communicate carefully, and collaborate confidently, it means that when other people communicate to you from within that culture, you tend to just trust that they're looking out for you and they're not trying to manipulate or be cryptic in their messages and what they're saying and such. Like, you can trust that they have your best interest in mind as well. So you don't have to constantly be watching your back in that particular culture. And I think that's a very valuable culture to be in. And I don't think very many people probably fit inside of that, and it doesn't exist in as many places as it should. But the thing I know is that there are more and more companies trying to incorporate things that would allow this, right? The more times I've seen companies that are implementing new schedules and rules and cultures that enable this seems to be growing, which is a positive thing, right? So anyway, trust totally.
Yeah, she mentions that trust totally happens when the other three pillars are functioning. So kind of you have the picture of a stool being supported by collaborating confidently, communicating carefully, and valuing visibly. There's not a whole lot in this specifically because it's really the manifestation of the other three when they are happening. But one thing she does say in this section, which I liked, is that details develop trust, especially with me. But that also ties back to something from Collaborate Confidently, which I think is worth calling out here, that less haste equals more speed. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If you want to go far together, you need to communicate effectively. If you're going to communicate effectively, you need to slow things down and make sure that you are articulating your message in the correct way on the correct channel. I think this is the one that just drives me nuts more than anything else, is people who are thinking that they're going to delegate something quickly and they just shoot off a quick text without any details, and they essentially just dump it on people's laps to figure it out and get it done. I'm happy to help you do this, but I need more information. And I'm probably guilty of this myself. So I am reading all of this stuff and creating my own action items based off of the things that I see here, which are all specific to me. You know, I can help move the needle in that specific area by responding not immediately, which enforces this back and forth, but carefully considering how I want to respond and how I'm going to ask the questions in order to get the response that I need, which kind of ties back to our initial conversation about the context-based reminders. If I know that I need to respond to this thing, I can put it in the right context. I can then think about how I am going to do that, because that's what I'm going to do anyways. My brain is going to just be thinking about this over and over and over again. And then when I am in the right place to communicate face-to-face instead of via text message, then I can ask the question and I can get the answer that I need. Because replying via text is just not going to work.
Maybe. Depends on who we're talking about, right?
Well, for me, I know there is enough of a track record here where I will text back and I won't get a response for several hours.
Yep.
And then I'll get that response and I'll have an additional question. So I'll reply and I will be sitting there waiting for a response for another several hours or several days sometimes.
Yes.
So this is, now I can get upset about that and be like, well, they're the ones who need this thing done. Like they should tell me what I need to know. That doesn't help me. So
yes,
I'm going to just do what I can to move this in the right direction. And I am going to take ownership of it and context switch when it's appropriate and face to face, essentially corner the person and say, okay, so this is what I need to know.
Yes.
And get my answer that way. And should I have to do that? Maybe not. But it's not worth getting upset about. It's just the way it is. And it's really not that big a deal. I can create a system on my own end that will help me just disconnect from this thing in the moment until it's appropriate to re-engage with it and get the information that I need so that we can ultimately work together, because that is the truth. We're on the same team here. This is not my enemy trying to harm me. They want to help me. I just need to take ownership of it and be like, okay, so I'm going to ask you in a way where I'm going to get the answers that I need so that we can move forward together.
This is a good jumping off point. So part 3, digital body language across difference. And what you're saying is exactly that, right? So my whole house buying process, this is a very good example of this, because my real estate agent is one who morphs to his clients' communication methods. He has people who want to call him every single time. He has people who are perfectly fine texting all the things, which is me. So he texts me constantly with whatever it is he needs or things that are coming up. But I know that he will call people with the exact same information because that's their preference in communication methods. And when we get into these differences, that one is a generational difference, I think. So let me pin that one for a second. The first difference, though, that she talks about is masculine versus feminine digital body language. And she has these 2 lists here that I think explain this much better than any way I could. So I want to use her words instead of mine. That way I don't come across as a mansplainer here. So, which she does talk about here. I don't think we're going to talk about it, but it does exist in this book. So from a masculine digital body language stance, here's some, I guess they would be stereotypes would be the way to put this. It's just kind of, these
Sure.
are what are typical, right? People don't like the word stereotype, but they exist for a reason, I suppose. But there's that. So masculine, confidently transfers conversations between mediums. I totally do this. I'll be texting with somebody and then I'll see them in person like, hey, when we were talking about, I do this all the time, refrains from using emojis or excessive punctuation. Yes to the latter, not the former. Ensures messaging is short, well organized, and to the point. Uses bullet points and clear subject lines in emails. Often CCs superiors on emails, even when unnecessary, with the goal of receiving praise. Definitely seen that one. Uses boosters to make their messages more assertive and definite. Things like always, definitely, obviously, those words. And has quick response times. Okay? That is the masculine digital body language. Again, this is generalized. The feminine digital body language, okay, prefers face-to-face meetings over digital mediums, uses niceties and politeness as tools along with hedging language. Examples would be perhaps, might, I think maybe, those types of things. Uses intensive adverbs, non-standard spelling, and punctuation to reveal emotion. So some examples would be so with 3 O's, question mark, exclamation point, back and forth. Ridiculously, no way, with way too many O's and A's. They always proofread messages, which is kind of odd to me that those 2 don't line up to me. And it has slower response times. So you start to compare those. It's like, okay, how on earth do we ever get together and get married at all? Like, how does this happen? Because these are so drastically different. But That's what she's talking about. There are very big differences in a lot of these cases, and you just have to be aware of that whenever you're communicating to someone of the opposite gender.
Yeah. So this whole section, it kind of builds up to the digital mansplaining that you were talking about, and she defines it, which is the patronizing way men try to explain things to women who actually may know more. And the reason that that happens is that many women are conditioned to build consensus and many men are not. And I think I probably have fallen into this, which is really why one of the things I talked about at the very beginning, my big takeaways from this book is that you may have your own natural digital body language. That's fine, but that's not good enough for communicating effectively in the age that we live. I need to do a better job of understanding who I am communicating with. And gender is just one piece of that. Generationally, culturally, even just individually, there are, if you pay attention, you can understand people's preferences. And I could just default to, well, this is how I communicate and stick with my preferences, which is a very selfish way to communicate. Or the selfish way would be if you're going to be an effective leader, I would argue you have to do it this way. You have to understand who you are trying to communicate to and then adapt to speak their language. Put the message, if it's important, into a format that they are able to understand, which requires you to be able to mode shift and do things a little bit differently. End your sentences with periods occasionally and use emojis at other times.
Or forget the period occasionally in some cases.
Or add a bunch of exclamation points or question marks, which she has a couple of graphics in the previous section about what the number of those actually means, which is
that was so fascinating to me.
Kind of hilarious and very, very educational for me.
How many exclamation points do I have to put on to indicate anger instead of excitement? That's pretty much what it comes across as.
Yep.
This we've talked about this one multiple times, but the next chapter here is generational differences, right? And she has a section about embracing the emoji, which I had to put an emoji in the show notes. Not that you can see that, but I just had to. It's like I can't put embrace the emoji there without putting an emoji. But when you have generational differences, you have to be willing to change your medium and your methods and the way that you type things. And again, with the house buying thing, obviously I've got the things with the agent, but I've also had, we have to have a septic put in the place. The installer, the designer, a second installer who is actually our neighbor, soon to be neighbor, they all have different methods that they use to communicate. One of them is a texter, one of them is an email person, and one of them says that all of the digital communication is done by his wife, so a phone call is the only way to get a hold of him. And I have all three of those. Well, me going through this book and having learned all this, like I morph to whatever it is that they need. But I also become aware of other people who know this and they morph to me at the same time. So when I notice that someone is morphing to me, I generally would just say, if you would rather call me. Like, I'm fine with that instead of texting me, because sometimes it's quicker. And they will, in a lot of cases, like, I don't want to text you, but you're a texter, so I'll text you. And I'm like, that's fine. If you want to call me. It's fine. If you have my number, you have the right to call me. If I don't want you calling me, you probably won't get my number in any way. Or you'll get a Google Voice number, and I can block you very easy. So there is that. So it's just a good thing to know. Everybody's generation has, all these different generations. We have our tendencies. We have the ones that we grew up with, that we're familiar with and comfortable with. I know that my kids are probably not going to be comfortable making phone calls because they just don't need to. I'm not even super comfortable making phone calls, but I know that my parents and grandparents' phone calls were what they did. So my grandmother would spend hours on the phone calling relatives on Sunday afternoons. It's just what she did every week. I have no interest in that at all, but that's what she did. Anyway, generational differences.
So you are a digital native.
I suppose. I think, as the term has been going around, I'm pretty sure I'm a geriatric millennial is the term that I've heard and used. So I think that's where I fit in on things. But having grown up in the Midwest, it throws this weird flavor, and I'm just strange. That's what I am.
Yeah, it's true. Well, in this chapter, she talks about digital natives versus digital adapters and gives several characteristics of each. And I think I'm probably somewhere in the middle. But the big difference is that the digital natives don't like the real-time face-to-face of a phone call. They would prefer to text. And they even say, you are probably a digital native if you text first to ask if you can call. Whereas a digital adapter is just going to default to the call.
I do that. Hey, do you want to call? Do you have time for a call? I'll text and ask that question.
I do that sometimes. And when I read that, I was like, I'm just going to start calling.
Yeah. Most of the time it's fine.
Yeah.
I should probably do that. There are times whenever I call people, I think of it as a cold call when I haven't set it up ahead of time. I know that a cold call is like, we've never met, this is the first time we've ever communicated. That's a cold call. But in my head, a cold call is when we didn't plan it.
Sure.
Like, even if it's you, like calling you without me telling you I'm going to call you feels like a cold call. And I wouldn't really do that. It's like, hey, do you have time for a call? I will always text you first. It's kind of how I work. The last difference here that she mentions in this part is cultural differences. And this is one, I wish I had read this when I was running my primarily web development business, because I worked with so many different cultures. And there were a lot of times I would email my point of contact at the company and just never hear back from them. And I never knew, did I say something wrong? Did I type it wrong? And like, I could follow up with them and never hear from them. And having read this, there are probably some things I did or said in the process that possibly either offended them or they realized like, oh, he doesn't actually know what he's talking about. Like, even though I do.
Was it a high context culture?
I think so. In most of those cases, I think it was, yeah. So that is one that I'm aware of now and wish I had known at the time, but alas, here we are. But yes, cultural differences play a big part in choosing, again, the medium and the way that you communicate.
Yep. The big differentiation here is high context cultures, which prefer face-to-face communications, and low context cultures like the US that prefer email and text. So I think you're right. There maybe is an opportunity there for stuff to be misinterpreted because you default to, well, I'm in the US. Email's the way we communicate. So this is what I'm going to do. Whereas with email, you could make a request to somebody in a high context culture, for example, and she uses, I think, India as the example where someone had made a request of somebody via email and their boss got really, really upset because in their culture, it was normal that you talk to their superior first before you make any sort of request. And they basically viewed it as like stealing their employees' time, so many things to consider here that I think if you don't, there's a very good chance you're going to step on somebody's toes.
Yes.
The big takeaway from this for me is that when you make a mistake, make sure that you apologize.
Yes.
Because she basically talks about how you're going to make these mistakes. There's no way you can know all of the different nuances with all of the different cultures, but you should definitely do a little bit of preliminary research and see if there's anything that like the emoji, for example. Make sure you don't send a thumbs up emoji to somebody in those cultures absolutely. Where it's completely offensive, and then err on the side of formality. So with the email, for example, even if you have a relationship with the person, you can still cover a lot of that stuff if you are extremely formal in your interaction, as opposed to more informal, which I think I tend to do this a lot. Like a lot of formal emails will start with hi or hello, and kind of the informal millennial version of that is hey. Almost every single email I write is like, hey, so-and-so. So I need to be careful when I'm communicating with somebody in a different culture. I'm going to make sure that I'm writing complete sentences. I'm using hi or hello. I'm signing off appropriately. I'm using bulleted lists to summarize what I'm asking for, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, please do. There's a lot, I think, in this particular piece. So as we step into the last piece of this whole book, which is the conclusion, which is basically a couple pages of wrap up, is really all she's doing. But this is probably the first time I caught myself scanning and spending time with the appendix. Did you do this?
I did not.
Usually when I have an appendix in a book, I'll glance at them to see what they are, just so I have a reference in my brain for the future if I ever wanted to go back to it. This one kind of caught me because this is an actual guidebook.
Yep.
That she puts in the appendix, which I think is really interesting. If you were to boil down the rest of the book to the point where you could get like you were saying earlier, the tips and tricks, the whole book has tons of stories in it, but this has an actual step-by-step for a lot of things to help you choose what it is that you're going to do. Like if you're going to text, what's a good way to do it in what situation?
Mm-hmm.
What's the audience? How fast should you respond? Like she has some answers for those questions. So it really is kind of like a handbook that you could hold on to. And it's like, okay, someone just texted me. They're higher up than me. And how do I, what is the time frame? How do I respond? What's a good way to respond? And then you could go to this and it could help you figure that out. I kind of appreciate that. That's super helpful. But again, this is the first time I found myself like spending decent amount of time with the appendix of a book. So kudos to Erica on that one, because I can't say I've done that before.
Yeah, I think this is a valuable summary of the things that she talks about in the book, and I could see using it as a reference, but I did not spend a whole lot of time with it prior to recording. I could be wrong, but that was my interpretation of it as looking at it, is it looked like a collection of all of those call-out boxes with all of the tactics from the book itself. So you could reference them easily, broken down by different sections and things.
Yeah.
I think that if you're going to include a whole bunch of stuff like she does in this book, this is a very valuable addition.
For sure. Yeah. All right, so action items. I suppose I get to go first on this one, don't I? I have two. We didn't talk about these, but the two that I have, one that's easier than the other, is to pick up the phone more. Like, have this thing in my pocket all the time. Why do I not just tap somebody's name in the phone app instead of the messages app? And if I were to do that with at least certain people more often, I feel like the relationships that I have with them would be quite a bit better. So that is something that I want to attempt to get better at. And I know a couple folks that I'm planning to call over the weekend just because. Not any particular reason. Just I want to try that just to see how that changes some things. The other one that I have is compliment in public. This goes all the way back to the first chapter in part 2, Value Visibly. I don't, and this kind of plays into that whole lead my team thing from last episode, Leaders Eat Last. It kind of plays into that, but trying to make sure that whenever I see my team members doing something that I really like, I want to make sure that they know it and that the people around them see that I like it, right? So making sure that it's very visible that I'm seeing the value that they're bringing to the table. So that is what I want to do. Those two things. That's what I'm going to work on this next 2 weeks.
All right.
You?
I got a bunch of little ones here. The first one is to eliminate, I know you're really busy.
Yeah.
Which is my default intro line whenever I am following up with something to someone who said they were going to get something to me and they haven't by the time frame that I expect it back. I never really realized that could be offensive, but I get why it might be. So I'm just going to try to be a little bit more direct and try to temper the message a little bit in different ways. I also want to figure out the norms for communication with all of the different teams and organizations that I'm involved with. And I want to codify these probably in Obsidian. I want to have a reference of these. And I'm not sure I'll be able to 100% figure these out for all of the different areas, but that's the goal. I also want to ban the mute button in all of my video stuff. I like that. That was from somewhere in the first section. I think it was under value visibly, where when you have a mute button and you turn it on, you kind of know that like something's happening around the person. You just can't hear it. So you just move forward with the conversation, but you kind of assume that they're not really paying attention. And so that's kind of it's kind of a way to show, not intentionally, but like I don't really value the conversation that's happening. So I want to institute that rule wherever I can. There's a quiz that goes along with this. At the end of each of the 4 sections, there's a lot of like fill in the blanks where you think your organization is, but there's an online quiz at, I think it's ericadhawan.com/digital body language that I want to take. I don't know if I am in a position where like it would be applicable to me. Maybe it's like for your entire organization. I'm not the person who would take that, but I want to check it out. And then the last one is I want to be mindful of whose voices I amplify. And this kind of comes back to the whole third part about body language across differences. I think in the tech space specifically, there's a lot of historically white dudes, which is not great if you want to get a diversity of opinions. And then you combine that with the fact that like the masculine versus feminine digital body language, and we're kind of wired just to communicate a certain way, get our stuff out there, take center stage. And I recognize that is a stereotype, first of all, but also probably I default that way. And so I don't want to just continue to amplify voices that are exactly like mine. I want to, when I retweet someone, not just retweet the people who look and sound exactly like me. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I don't have any sort of criteria for this, but I know there's lots of interesting people doing lots of interesting things online. And that's a very small thing I can do to help make the internet a little bit more pleasant and a little bit more diverse.
So you're saying the internet is unpleasant?
Can be. I don't see the vitriol that a lot of other people see.
I don't know.
But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I'm not trying to downplay that. Twitter is primarily positive for me, probably because of all of the filters that I've set up.
Yeah, that's definitely what it is on my side. I mute so many things that it's really kind of a nice place to be for the most part because all the bad stuff doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Fun times. So I suppose that brings us to style and rating, unless you have more action items you want to pile
That's
on.
it. I'm good.
All right. So style and rating. Let's just say that Erica is good at storytelling. And sometimes I wonder if we say that on every single book, I wonder if people have just gotten a lot better at storytelling, or we're just picking books that have good storytellers in them. I don't know what that is, but it seems like we've picked a lot of books with good storytellers. Erica is no exception to that. And she does a good job of keeping me in a spot where I really want to see what's going to happen next. And again, this is a topic that was very interesting to me, so I had a very hard time putting this one down. Again, I don't know if that's so much her writing style as much as my extreme interest in her topic, but combine it all, and this was a book I really, really enjoyed going through. I don't think as we've gone through this, I don't think there have been any points where I felt like we were arguing with her, saying she was absolutely wrong, or that there are things that she needs to expand on or shrink. Like, we really didn't find any of that here. The only real exception might be the point at which she was saying the one-day turnaround on emails. But even that, she tells a story later on of a cult. I think it was in the culture. No, it wasn't cultures. There's a section later on where there's a CEO or somebody that only responds and sends emails on the weekends. And his team knew that. So they wouldn't worry about emails that he would send, and they would only reply to him on Mondays, and that was expected and completely normal. And that was made known by him. So that sort of thing can be done, and she does give us that out from that. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I don't really think there was much to argue with her on this one. There's a lot of this that I totally agree with. I wish I had read this sooner. As far as like how to rate it though, like I don't think this is a 5, just because I don't think it fits the territory of what we normally see in a 5. Just, I don't know if that's maybe topic or the way it comes across. I don't know that it, even if you just absolutely nailed this, I don't know that we would put it at a 5, just because the subject material that we're talking about doesn't really put it in that territory, I don't think. But as far as like how she got how she conveyed the message of let's learn how our body language is translated into a digital communication method, and how do you choose that, and how do you become better at that, I feel like she did a really good job. And I'm very grateful for her putting this book together and having a chance to read it. So that all said, I'll put it at 4.5. Again, I don't think it goes all the way to the 5, but I really, really like this. And I know I've got a number of folks I'm going to recommend this to. I've already had a couple of our youth leaders ask me about it because they saw a couple of the pictures I posted about it. And they're like, please tell me if that's worth reading, because I can never communicate with the kids in my group correctly. And now I know it's probably because they're using periods. So
it could be.
All right, that's where I land, 4.5.
All right. Well, I'm going to join you at 4.5. I think it's really good. I think there's lots of practical stuff in here. I think she speaks to this topic better than anybody else I have ever heard. I don't think it's a completely life-changing book. I know communication is a big deal. I know a lot of it happens digitally. I just prefer to do it in person whenever possible. So that's like the only thing I can say against this is like, you can apply everything in this book, and there is a possibility that you think there I have mastered communication, but really you are avoiding the way that it should happen in certain situations. And she has, I'm sure, other books that speak directly to that. This book could not be written at a better time. I guess, it could have been released right when everything was shutting down, but it is very applicable for the world that we find ourselves in. A lot of companies are doing this hybrid thing. Some people are coming back to the office, some people continuing to work remotely, or they're working remotely a bunch of the time and they come to the office for a day or two a week. So I think a lot of businesses would benefit by making this mandatory reading for all of their all of their executives and all of their employees. It's really, really good. I got a lot out of it. Even though if you would ask me before we started, do I think that I have a better understanding of effective digital communication than a lot of other people that I associate with? I would have said yes. And then I read this and I'm like, actually, there's a lot here that I'm doing wrong. Not in a condemning way, like I'm the problem for all this stuff, although that's the approach I choose to take, because I don't want to just play the victim and assume that everyone else is going to have to figure this out before my life gets better. I want to do what I can. And that's the cool thing about this is like, unlike a lot of the other books that we read, which I feel like a lot of our authors try to couch it as, well, this book is for everybody and you can apply this from the bottom up. You really can't. This one, I think there's a clear path to doing that, even if it's just in like one specific relationship that you have in your life. There are things that you can do to make that interaction a little bit more positive. So I would recommend this to absolutely everybody. Like I said, if you would have asked me before this, do I need to read this? I would have probably told you no, but I'm really glad that I did, and I did learn a lot. So I think there's a lot of people like me who can understand some things a little bit better. Even just understanding that there are differences between the different cultures, the different genders, the different generations, without her explicitly calling out every single little thing would still be helpful, but she does call out all those little things. And as she's going through those, I could totally picture people in my life who are like, yeah, they're older than me. And that's why they respond very directly with a period. And it seems like they're mad. They're not. It's just they're older. That's the way they have learned to communicate. So taking that into consideration, I'm not going to freak out when I get those text messages anymore. I think there's a ton of value to be had from this.
When you were talking about this, it just occurred to me is like whenever I'm around my father-in-law, he's a texter now because he knows that other people text, but he doesn't like texting, so he does it with voice. And if you've ever received a voice-generated text from somebody, like there is no punctuation unless they call it out, and it's usually a handful of run-on sentences. Nothing is capitalized. Like that's just how it kicks out, right? That's how these voice-to-text systems work right now. I mean, they're getting better, but that's how they come across. Well, if you get one of those texts, it just seems weird. Like, is he mad with me? Is he?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what does he want? Like, that's just kind of how it comes across. And I've told him this. Like, it's kind of strange. So it works for him. It's the way it goes. Anyway, we can be done with this. Mike, what is next? Next book is yours. What did you pick?
Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. We're going to procrastinate, baby.
Are you still going to put off your procrastination log?
If I'm going to do that action item, this is when it's going to happen. So,
All right. Fair enough. The book I'm choosing for after that is Liminal Thinking by Dave Gray. The tagline on this one is "Create the change you want by changing the way you think." And I've had this one recommended to me a couple times, one from a friend just this morning. So I feel like this one's popped up on my radar a handful of times recently. So while it's on my mind, I would like to cover it with you because I think this would be a good one for us.
All right.
That's what I'm thinking. So anyway, Liminal Thinking. That's what we'll do after Procrastinate on Purpose. I'm in the middle of buying a house, Mike. So time to read continues to evade me. I almost didn't get this one done, our actual Bookworm book. So there is no way there's a gap book happening this time or next time. So do you have one? Can you redeem Bookworm and say you're going to have a gap book this time around?
I can say I'll have a gap book. I can't say what it's going to be.
Okay.
I will be on sabbatical next week as we record this. So I will be reading something, but I don't know what it is yet.
That's fair. All right. Well, big thanks to everybody who has been able to join us live. I know there have been a number of folks in and out with the chat and such. I know we don't always respond to the chat while we're recording, but it's still cool to see some of the conversations that happen there, and it does influence some of what we say. So thank you to those of you who join us live, and also a huge thank you to those of you who are on our Bookworm Club membership program as well. So thank you to you guys. If you haven't joined that and you want to, go to bookworm.fm/membership, and that will get you to the pages and all the things that you need in order to join that. And that's where you can get, like Mike was saying earlier, the MindNode files that he puts together for this, as well as a few other things on the site as well. So we'd love to have you on board. Helps us buy our books and keep the sites and the podcasts and stuff all up and running. So thank you for that.
All right. So if you're reading along with us, which you totally should, then buy Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden, or get it from your local library. And we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.